Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. Many of us just use it to drink, but there are so many more purposes that we can do with tea. And with me is Joanna Preuss, and we're going to talk about tea, the health benefits, what we can do with it, and anything else you can think of. And I would like to welcome Joanna Preuss. Joanna,
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Delighted.
How did you get started in writing cookbooks?
Well, I decided to move to Paris because I wanted to be Audrey Hepburn, and she'd gone to cooking school at the Cordon Bleu. She'd learned to crack an egg with one hand, and this, of course, led to her finding her Prince Charming in the form of Humphrey Bogart. But I thought, all right, if I went to Paris and I learned to cook, I would find my prince as well. And I ultimately did live with a prince outside of Florence in a 15th century farmhouse that had been modernized in the 18th century.
Oh, wow.
But we cooked a lot, and I did go to cooking school, and I have been cooking ever since. When I moved back to the United States, I started a cooking school in a supermarket because I felt people really didn't know how to buy ingredients. In France, we buy ingredients all the time, and you could buy carrots. If you buy great carrots, you can make really just a wonderful, simple dish just by having good carrots and good butter and good whatever. But and you can get those at supermarkets by knowing how to buy them.
Well, that led you into...
Well, I ultimately wrote my first cookbook, which was called Supermarket Epicure, How to Go Shopping. I had, in my school, I had classes for the blind, the deaf, the learning disabled. And I ultimately had 15,000 students. I had 30 teachers. And wow. I felt people really needed to just share a lot about food. So at the same time as I was writing it, I started writing for the Sunday New York Times Magazine about food. And one thing led to another. I wrote for a bunch of publications, and then so I wrote this book, and then I've written 10 more, something like that. I'm working on a couple now. And you know, I really love food, and I love to share, and along the way I started working for the specialty food industry, where I started developing recipes for clients. And one of the companies I met, 1986-7, I met the Harneys from Harney & Sons Tea, and I kept saying, this is amazing tea. And I said, but you know what, you can do something, because I've got a slightly crazy mind, I said, you know, we've tea smoked duck for thousands of years. And then I started putting tea in all kinds of things. I just teaized everything. So that's how this book basically came. I went to John and I said, John, we need to tell people how to use tea. So I did. And you know, I've had this really good fortune in this industry. I have met a lot of the wonderful purveyors, and you find a wonderful preserve and you can do something with it. Sarah Beth's Kitchen has fabulous plum cherry preserves. I said, well, why don't we put plum cherry preserves with a little soy sauce and Chinese 5 spices, and we'll saute off duck breasts and we'll use it as a glaze.
And voila, you've got your tea cookbook.
Oh yes, and I have my tea cookbook.
How do you come up with all this stuff? Do you experiment?
I do. I have a good taste memory.
Okay, if you are, that's an interesting comment about a good taste memory.
Because I know what things, you know, my first career I was a fashion designer. And I would put strange things together. The clothes that actually ended up in Vogue magazine, they were suede with jersey and chiffon and leather. And they were in the windows of the stores on Fifth Avenue. I have a not classic background in terms of ethnicity. I've got all of these different, I'm a Heinz 57. So if you said to me, Joanna, well, what are you going to do from your family? Well, you know what? My great-grandmother on one side was Austro-Hungarian. So we have strudel. Then my parents traveled around the world a lot, and I ended up making curried scallops. And I put curried scallops inside of individual strudels, and it's all an aesthetic thing.
What I'm getting confused is because I always like to experiment myself.
Right.
And my grandmother once said to me, the worst that can happen, it tastes bad and you throw it out. How many times do you repeat a recipe until you figure you get it right?
I did a recipe this week for my magazine, my regular specialty food magazine, where my editor asked me to do expensive cheeses that the upscale retailers could sell. So I took farmhouse Stilton, English Stilton, and I decided to make a cream puff. Now, you could just mash the Stilton, but it would be very heavy. So I said, well, what can I do to cut it? So the first thing I did is I put in ricotta, so I'd make like a ricotta filling. Then I put in sour cream at one point. And I kept going through, and it wasn't right. I did it 4 times. The last thing I finally did was I just whipped heavy cream with the cheese. I piped it inside of the cream puff. Then I decided, well, when you get a blue...
I'm getting hungry.
You get a really gorgeous blue cheese, and on like a cheese platter. So I took dried tart cherries and I glazed them in port and a little bit of currant preserves. And then so I piped it. I piped it, and then I put a little bit of these cherries on top, and then I covered it. And so you have the lightened effect of the whipped cream. It is a dessert. You still have the Stilton, which has a lot of flavor.
Right.
And then you have this fabulous accent of these tart, sweet cherries.
And you didn't bring a sample of that?
I know everybody ate them. I brought you a picture, but that's, but you know,
doesn't
yes.
help.
No. The thing is I love experimenting. And you say, or as your grandmother would have said, well, it doesn't really taste good. See, that's the point where I start tinkering and I say, well, now what am I going to do with it? Because it's like a challenge to me.
Yeah, because when I cook, somebody would say, what is your favorite dish? And I don't have a favorite dish because every time I cook, it's always different.
Right.
Except when I'm baking. That I haven't quite...
Because that's chemistry.
Right, and I haven't quite mastered that to get a formula.
My idea is that after doing as many cookbooks and writing for as many people as I do have to document it. I initially did the same thing. I would do a little of this, a little of that. But when your job is to actually present recipes that can be repeated by 25,000 people out there, then you really have to make it a formula. And so that's what I do. When I was doing macaron, for example, you know, it's a baking principle, and doing meringue is not easy. So you do have to get an idea of what will work and what won't work. But to me, that's the fun. You know, I have a good time with it.
I want to be a taster at your place.
It would be a pleasure.
My question, okay, now you brought a lot of teas. Let's start with teas. Teas are becoming more, well, not becoming more, people are becoming more attuned to teas because of the health benefits.
First of all, we have much better quality teas today.
All right, let's start with that. How do you select a good quality tea that's not going to break the bank?
Well, you want to go to a reliable purveyor, or you want to go to somebody who sells a lot of tea, because tea, like everything else, gets old. And it loses its volatile oils, it loses its flavor.
So you mean the tea that I bought in 1984,
Exactly.
I can't use?
Well, if you want to tea dye your little lace shawl or something, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sure, but tea dye, you know, I would say buy less. I mean, there are a lot of tea purveyors out there now. And don't buy the giant economy size, like don't buy a giant economy size of olive oil. It too goes off.
Okay.
So you could do what I say about olive oil or a lot of foods. Find a friend who likes the same thing and go and experiment and try little bits. You can keep notes about what really appeals to you. Learn how to brew it correctly, and we can talk about that in 1 second. But but the one thing I wanted to say is when you go and you buy tea bags and they're cheap, a lot of what you get in there are fannings, and fannings are tea dust. And so they're really not going to give you a lot of flavor. There are lots of different sizes and styles of tea. There are many, many. It's all from the Camellia sinensis plant. All black teas and green teas, they're all from the same plant, but it depends on how it's treated after, when it's harvested and how it's harvested. And there are a lot of tea comes out of India, a lot of tea comes out of China. But the first thing I say to somebody is buy a decent tea. Then don't leave it out on your counter in a clear canister where it's going to get a sunburn. You know, it's going
to fade?
Yeah, it is not going to keep its flavor. The other thing is you should brew it correctly. Now, my mother, God love her, her idea of making tea was she took a tea bag, she swished it around in the teacup, and then she left it on the counter so she'd use it again.
That's me.
It's a lot of people. And the first thing, I think I said to you once before that if you really don't want a lot of caffeine in your tea, the first thing that goes out of caffeine when you put it in hot water is caffeine. The first thing that goes out of tea is the caffeine.
Okay.
The second is the color. The third is the flavor. So what you can do is you could pour hot water and really just bring it to a boil.
Not where the tea kettle's whistling.
Where the tea kettle could just be whistling. In my house, the tea kettle whistles. But you pour it in over the leaves, and you let the leaves unfold. Now, if you have a tea bag or you have a tea infuser such as this, which you put in your cup.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you want to decaffeinate it, you let it sit there for 20, 30 seconds. You lift it out, you throw out the water, and you start over again, and you brew a black tea for 5 minutes.
Yeah, because I remember one of my friends was making tea, and he sat there with a clock.
Me.
Well, he did it for 3 minutes, and it was so bitter that everybody at the dinner table asked for a plain pot of water to cut it.
Well, it depends how much tea he put in, too.
I don't know.
Okay, but again, most tea today says on it how long you should steep it for and the quantity, and usually we say a teaspoon. Now, when I do something like this is green fruits in jasmine tea syrup, and you steep the tea, if you're going to start cooking, and I say this in this book, if you're going to start cooking with tea, what you have to do is just steep it until it is no longer bitter as compared to what you, and I don't know why at 3 minutes it should have been bitter. But if you want to reduce the tea, if you want a thicker, you want a more intense flavor, you got to get the tea leaves out of there, because if you let it sit for 10 minutes while you're boiling away, you really are going to get a bitter taste.
You take your tea bag, you let it sit there for 20 seconds.
3 to 5 minutes, depending on whether it's
yeah, but I wanted to get the caffeine out.
Okay. Oh, then you just do 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
To 30 seconds.
Then throw that water away.
Completely.
And
start all over again.
Okay, with hot water.
Yep.
You let that brew for
5 minutes. If it's a black tea.
Okay, and then it's drinkable.
It is definitely drinkable.
All right, and then.
And I mean, I just think this is such a good invention. I mean, okay.
Okay, so this is for loose tea.
That is for loose tea. Now, one of the big inventions of late is silk or nylon tea bags, because we found out that some people put them in fabric, in cloth or in paper that leaves a flavor, or sometimes they have, you know, you have something printed on it. Well, that's going to impact what you're drinking.
Okay, so this is really healthier, is what you're saying.
It is healthier. Well, it's also a lot better.
But it's more expensive, of course.
You know, it really, I think in the end, it really depends how much you want to enjoy the experience.
All right.
You can get mass market teas, and there are some very decent mass market teas, but if you really want to have fabulous teas, I mean, every morning I get up and I brew myself a cup of tea.
Now, you brew it with the infuser?
I do.
All right, versus the tea bag.
Well, and I confess to now using some really good tea bags too. And there are these little triangular shaped tea bags that are made with, they have studied what is in this enclosure, whether it's silk or it's a special fiber. It does not add a flavor to what you're eating or drinking.
I've seen it where you can buy these and fill your own.
Okay, you can do that.
Okay, so there's no big difference. Now, you brought some teas.
Well, I mean, okay. So one of the big trends about tea is we know that tea is healthful. It's got a lot of antioxidants, and we know people are drinking a lot of green tea.
Right.
But what we also know, this is done I think this is done with Deepak Chopra. These are healthful teas. This is a ginger tea. There are all kinds of Ayurvedic teas that are out there now. And if you want to calm down, if you just want, you know, there are relaxation teas. It's quite fabulous what has happened in the tea industry. You know, so I've worked for the specialty food industry since 25 years. And I have watched, when we used to go to the fancy food, I still go to the fancy food show, a couple tea purveyors. Now every other guy's a tea purveyor.
So tea is hot.
Yeah, tea is definitely hot. Flavored teas. I mean, this is a gift. This is a holiday tea.
Oh, wonderful.
And you can get tea that would have all kinds of herbs and spices. One of the things that I did in this book is I did, do you know what chai is? Everybody's,
yes,
okay.
That's fabulous.
Everybody loves it. So what I did is I made chai ice cream. And you can buy chai,
right?
Take it home, use it as the flavor in your cream, and you make chai cream. And then I just put berry syrup or something on top of it, but it's yummy.
You're selecting teas. Now you see a lot of street vendors having this enormous display of teas, and they'll take a scoop and say, okay, how much do you want, and everything. How reliable, how good, how would you do it?
You don't know.
Okay.
If you know there are some wonderful tea salons in this city, in New York. You can buy terrific, again, it's a question, you want to go somewhere where they have a big turnover, and you do know that what you're getting is a good quality tea.
You're looking at this display. How do you tell a good tea?
Well, number one is I would smell it. And number two, if it's a random dealer, I'd just buy a small amount and take it home and try it. And this is really the ultimate rule I say to people. There is no fabulous or horrible unless it is that to you. If you love the tea and it satisfies that inner happiness in you, it's your tea. I mean, there are better qualities and there are teas that are very expensive. But you know what? It's really, Barrie, about what satisfies you.
That sounds good because,
It's
it's kind of like a wine, like everybody raves about a $500 bottle of wine, which I've yet to taste, versus a $20 bottle of wine, and sometimes they're just like, really?
Well, the other thing is you get more tea from a pound of tea than you do for a pound of coffee. You use less. You only use a teaspoon. So you will get a lot, and it sounds like a lot of money, but if you're just putting a teaspoon in there, it'll take a long time.
And we've got this
one.
Well,
this one is what I said to you was black jasmine, and the reason I brought it was that it is what I used in that green tea. You can smell the jasmine flowers.
Oh, lovely.
Yes. And so if you're buying a jasmine tea, you want to be able to see the flowers. And you want it to smell. I mean, okay. And so again, this is from a very famous tea company in Paris called Mariage Frères. It's probably the most well-known tea salon in Paris.
Fancy.
Yeah, I mean, and look at this one. Look what's inside of it.
There's nuts.
Well, there's all kinds of herbs in there. And you want it to unfurl.
Oh, you know what? Doesn't this one open up into a flower or something?
Yes. So I think that what tea is it's not just that black thing. I mean, in my house as I was growing up, tea was when you were sick.
Yes.
Okay? And then all of a sudden, actually, how I came to drink tea, my mom was a coffee drinker, but I had a cousin of my dad, and she invited me when I was in college to come visit her. And she said, would you like to take tea? And I was so impressed with her. She was 6 feet tall, and she was really this amazing lady. And we went to the top of the sixes. It shows you how long ago it was.
Last week.
Exactly. And she said to me, do you want tea? And I said, I'd love tea. So I was very impressed with that. And then at one point I was interviewing somebody very, very famous while I was living in Paris. They invited me for tea. And I just read Jessica Mitford's about the you and the non-you, about if you put your milk in the tea first or the tea in the milk first, right? And the reason you put milk in bone china was to keep it from cracking.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So this man's secretary said, will you take tea with Lord so-and-so? And I said, yes. And I was panicked. I was thinking he was going to make me put the tea in there. He said, he'll serve. And and he served, and I drank. But I felt like, okay, so I knew that. I already knew that it was just because of the china, the bone china, that they wanted to buffer it.
I never knew that because I basically drink hot water. And when I went to England to visit my friend, she said, you're going to drink the tea with milk in it. I said, okay, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Now I understand the whole purpose of it.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, to me, I love it. I really love tea with milk in the morning, not necessarily at night.
That'll keep you up.
Yeah, well, what I do is I always decaffeinate at night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
What's the last one there?
This is another very famous tea company, Demian, that is, I have all these different boxes of teas that I go around and collect and I taste, and let's see if this one I can get it off without. And it's really floral and beautiful.
Wow.
So,
that is lovely.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can use them as air fresheners.
well, now one of the things you might want to do as you want to try a tea, and I don't know that somebody who's a street vendor is going to let you do it, but you might want to pick up a couple leaves and crush them in your fingers to see if you can get the aroma. If it doesn't have any aroma in here, it's not going to have any aroma in your cup.
Right, now you brought some wonderful dishes here from your book.
Well,
okay.
So we talked about this is green fruits.
All right.
And with a jasmine syrup.
Now what kind of fruits are in there?
Honeydew and kiwi and grapes. And you can do another version with yellow fruits. You could take nectarines and apricots and pineapple and probably do like an Earl Grey flavor. And people have just loved it as a dessert, especially in the summer. It's very refreshing. It's light.
How did you make it? I'm just curious because I see you also have the mint leaf on there.
That's just to make it look pretty. Oh. I cut up the fruit and I infused a little bit of jasmine tea in a little cup for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. Then I strained it and pressed to get as much liquid as possible. I added sugar, lime juice, and then I just let it sit there.
Marinate.
Yeah, exactly. You want to taste it?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to just give it to you this way, maybe so that you can.
All right.
Let's see if we can do that.
Mmm.
Nice, huh?
It is really nice and light.
Right.
Great summer dish. Can you do this with watermelon?
You could, I think. I put watermelon in a salad with feta cheese all the time, but I've never done it with watermelon. I don't know why not. I certainly have done the orange version in the summer too, with peaches and nectarines and pineapple and apricots. Because the Earl Grey is distinctive because it has bergamot in it.
What is bergamot?
Bergamot's a season. Oil of bergamot is, I can't remember what it is. It's a spice. And it's an exotic spice, and you will know it. I don't have any Earl Grey with me, but that is what distinguishes it, as there are so many different kinds of teas. So this is salmon, and people know how to make gravlax, which is...
I've never made it.
Well, it's not very difficult. You take a side of salmon, you put on sugar, and in Scandinavia you usually put in dill and salt. And what happens is you weight it, and the salt pulls out the moisture from the salmon. And you turn it a couple of times, and then it becomes like smoked salmon, but it's dry. It's like dry cured.
How do you know when it's done?
It becomes slightly opaque. It's no longer as raw looking. And it does definitely change its color.
All right, like lobster or shrimp.
Exactly.
Okay, got the picture.
So then what would happen with this one, I said, okay, so I've made gravlax a lot of times, but I decided to put lapsang souchong, which is a smoky tea, into the salmon. And I just took little crackers and I made some cream cheese with green tea in it.
Now with the green tea, did you brew it?
No, it's powdered and you can pulverize it. There's a lot of ways, that's such a good question, because there's a lot of ways to use tea in cooking. You can use it decoratively. I do here I do it here too, just the leaves. But in here there's this wonderful salmon with Earl Grey tea and a little bit of orange zest in it and some spices. And it's, again, very simple, but people go, wow, that tastes so good, and it's just so different.
So you can just powder it?
You can. You can literally either put it in a coffee grinder, which you'd clean out, obviously, or you could take some wax paper and just
let me see.
And just rub it. Yeah, and make it and pulverize it. I did salmon with white and black. Can I show you a picture?
Sure.
Okay. I did salmon with white and black sesame seeds with some tea on it too. I did want to point out, I think that is the prettiest dessert ever. That is a green tea mousse in a candied coconut tuile.
Oh my God.
And it has just, people who taste it go crazy.
Now, as a mousse, it will hold whipped cream?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So the thing is that you can do so many things with this stuff. That's a that is green tea bread.
Okay, so what you
did. This one is powdered.
Okay, so you powdered it.
Good point. You can buy, and you should buy powdered green tea. You can buy green tea in a bag, but if you go and buy matcha tea, M-A-T-C-H-A, green tea, it's already powdered. And it gives you much more, that's what's in here, green powdered tea.
So then it would be stronger flavor?
It could be stronger, but much more important is it would melt into the whole preparation. You wouldn't want to have a green tea that would be sort of gritty in something like this. You would like it to be really green and smooth. Yeah,
you don't want it sticking to your teeth,
no,
so you look funny
you
when you smile.
No. Yes, I know. This is a funny story. These are just farfallis. They're butterfly noodles. And when my great-grandmother used to make butterfly noodles, it was always, she was Hungarian and Austrian, always a lot of sour cream and poppy seeds. And talk about poppy seeds in your teeth. And I thought, well, wait a minute. You don't want to, we're trying to eat healthier. So what I did is I brewed chamomile tea, and I boiled the noodles in the chamomile tea so that you got that flavor in the noodles. And then what I did is I reduced a little chamomile tea with a very small amount of sour cream. And so you get the richness. What tea can do is it can replace a lot of fat, and it can add color. I was saying about tea dyeing, but you can get color from it.
Tea can be bitter, and it has some wonderful flavors also.
Right.
Excuse me. Do you find that you have to add a lot of sugar because people are very sugar conscious?
No.
Okay.
I don't think that's, I think the point is you don't have to add a lot of sugar.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what here. Here I just glazed pork chops, but I used some preserves and some Earl Grey tea. Again, that's that full bergamot flavor.
You go back and you experiment until you find something that you like, because you've got this world of knowledge in your head, and everybody's got to play with it.
So that's what I was saying. I took black and white sesame seeds and tea leaves.
But doesn't that get into your teeth?
Oh, you know what? Sesame seeds are one of my favorite things, so I guess you walk around with dental floss or something. I don't know. I just think there are so many kinds of teas, and there's so many ways to dress up your food that doesn't add a lot of calories. And I think that you can also pulverize tea and add it with other spices as a dipping thing. If you make fennel or something like that,
Is there any kind of tea that you would suggest staying away from to cook with?
No, there is none.
Okay.
That's what I was saying about the salmon.
Ah, okay.
And so it's very simple, but you just have it on top, and that little bit adds a lot of flavor. And I think what people who are on diets are always worried about taking out flavor. And if you can make salad dressings and replace some of the oil in salad dressings.
But oil is supposed to be very healthy for you, olive oil.
Depends on what, we're all back to the Mediterranean diet.
Exactly. Now, okay, so on the salmon here that you made,
yep,
you also did a cream cheese.
With green tea.
Green tea, all
yes.
right.
And that green tea was powdered green tea.
All right.
Okay.
And then what did you do here? You've got biscotti and you've got the macaroons.
Yeah, okay. The biscotti, in the cranberry orange biscotti, I put jasmine tea.
Why jasmine?
Because I liked it with the orange and the cranberry. And it's really nice is if you dip it in tea, in hot tea, you just it just awakens all those flavors.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
I didn't have any tea here, sorry.
And then there are almond biscotti that are just plain.
Almond biscotti.
Yeah. And you could put, again, it goes back to what I said. Does it please you? If you don't like jasmine tea, well, go use something else. There's Assam tea. There's all kinds. There's gunpowder tea it's really smoky. But if you just try experimenting, it'll become apparent to you. Some of the more aggressive tasting teas, the more assertive ones, you probably would not want to do in a dessert. But as we were speaking, my mind's going back to my cream puffs. And I was at the Harney's and I said, why don't we make, for St. Patrick's Day we were talking about it, we'll make green tea cream puffs with maybe a hit of some other tea in it, a jasmine or something.
Am I invited?
Absolutely.
Sounds good to me.
The thing is that in my house there's always too much food because we're always, that's my job.
That's a rough job.
You know what? I have the best job in the entire world.
You certainly do.
And it is such a joy to experiment.
Now, the macaroons, you used what kind of tea again?
Green tea.
Green tea.
And green tea in the filling. Oh, no, I think we
no.
have chocolate in the fillings as well. Oh, no. You can smell the green tea in that one and taste it.
Don't have to ask me twice.
But, you know, there's just, I did another one that was a ginger macaroon with
What's interesting is that this is green all the way through.
And you know what? Can you imagine you could put cocoa in there?
Cocoa?
Yep, I did another version. I did green tea and white chocolate as the filling, which was pretty sensational.
Whoa.
And so what happens is, for me, it's like going to a spice cupboard. The more you do it, the more you say, oh yeah, that would be kind of an interesting thing. And the first time you do it, I have a twin sister who is not a cook. She's a judge. And she follows recipes. And she's delightful, except that she doesn't like to improvise. And she said, I really wish I could have that sense. It is a certain liberty that I sort of say, like your grandmother said. You know, if I make a goof out of it.
You throw it away?
Yeah. You know, I served an awful lot of that Stilton cheese in various versions as dips for whatever. I had a great aunt who was Scottish, and I refused to throw food away.
I don't think, you know, the prices of food today.
No.
You don't want to, really.
No, you don't.
Joanna, in the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Buy great tea and experiment. And I think the more you use it, the more you'll want to use it, because there's just so much variety. It's great. It's a lot of fun, but it makes eating so much more wonderful. And sure, enjoy a good cup of tea, but also cook with it.
It's fun. Joanna, thank you so much
it was so much fun.
me. It's great.
Thank you.
Next time we'll have to have a real tasting of tea teas.
Well, and I'll be on to some other book at that point.
And thank you for joining us. I hope we've answered a few of your questions about cooking or drinking with tea. Love to hear what you are experimenting with. Write us here at the Women's Connection to tell us. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.